And I'm going to live stream us to Facebook. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Michaela Blanton. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm the intern for 350 Colorado's Regenerative Ag and Local Food Committee. And you are at our monthly webinar meeting where we're going to be talking with Lexi Hughes and Roberto Meza tonight about food systems and local food systems in Colorado and food hubs. We're joined by Micah Parkin tonight, who's the executive director for 350 Colorado. So I just wanted to say hi to Micah.
Hi, everybody. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Michaela and everyone.
You're welcome. So Roberto Meza is a co-founder of the East Denver Food Hub. And Lexi Hughes is the agriculture program lead at Mountain Roots Food Project. And with that, I would just love to hand it over to Lexi. And just a reminder to everyone again to please keep yourself on mute. Put in questions in the chat as you're coming up. We'll have a question and answer time at the end. And then this is being recorded, just so everyone knows. And with that, Lexi, you can take it away.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Lexi Hughes, the agriculture program lead at Mountain Roots Food Project in Gunnison, Colorado. I'm honored by the opportunity to listen, to share my story, and to be a part of this conversation. Food is one of our most basic human needs. The choices we make around food impact the health of our bodies, but they also play a significant role in the social, economic, and environmental health of our community. At the turn of the 20th century, all of our food systems were local and regional, but the development and evolution of a global industrialized food system has significantly changed the way we eat and our relationship to where our food comes from. It's also negatively impacted our environment and local economies. We at Mountain Roots believe that the path that food travels from farm to fork matters. Mountain Roots has been working for 10 years to transform our food system, to revitalize local agriculture, and to localize our food system because we believe that by doing so, we can have a positive and lasting impact on the long-term health of our environment, our people, and our community. We're a systems-based organization taking a multi-pronged approach to building the local and regional food system. Our 5 focus areas are food culture and education, food production, food security, food economy, and food policy. Our key programs include a district-wide farm-to-school program, our food security program, and the sustainable agriculture program, which I am going to go into greater detail about because it's the program I lead. The agriculture program at Mountain Roots cultivates 2 regenerative community farms and 4 hydroponic container farms, a greenhouse, and a seed garlic plot. My team and I are responsible for the day-to-day operations across these growing spaces, as well as planning and tending perennial and annual crops, animal husbandry, food aggregation and distribution, including the operation of our 130 share multi-farmer CSA program, and doing community engagement around agriculture. I'm responsible for the strategic planning of the long-term sustainability of the program, as well as leading and teaching a team of aspiring agrarians. The agriculture program's main focuses are education, which is my favorite, teaching the next generation of farmers and sharing our love of farming with the community to help build knowledge and resiliency. We do that by partnering with our local farmers to trade labor for their knowledge and skills. Another main focus is environmental health, so improving farm ecosystems and measuring the effects of regenerative farming on the health of the environment and the community. Economic sustainability, building and diversifying local markets to become a model for the economic benefit of local food systems. And lastly, furthering food security. So contributing to local food resources and food equity by donating fresh, healthy food directly to those who need it, as well as working towards year-round local food access. My program is unique in its aim to produce farmers with a social conscience who understand the importance of agriculture in environmental health, in food security, and in nutrition of underserved communities and food deserts. We empower them with the skills and knowledge to collectively manage diverse farm operations and distribution methods, to engage students and volunteers in practicing and teaching agricultural methods that have a positive impact on environmental and community health, and to build meaningful connections to our agricultural communities. Through their experience with us, emerging farmers don't just learn how to farm, they solidify their mission-driven purpose to seek out the communities where their knowledge and skills are needed the most, go there and do the hard work of starting up, overcoming challenges to become the ripple effect in re-envisioning our food systems. 2020, excuse me, 2020 has been a year like no other. The pandemic caused major disruptions to the industrial food system. And in our rural mountain community, the pandemic has proven to be a powerful catalyst for change. Across Colorado, small-scale organic farmers like us and the ones we support are playing a big role in community resiliency. Mountain Roots stepped up to the front lines of emergency food relief across all of our programs. Our community experienced a heightened need for food access and for food resources, particularly fresh organic vegetables. Suddenly, our mission became very real to the people in our community. We knew we had to get to work. This spring, we knew we needed to ramp up, scale up, grow more, do more. Some examples of this from my program are our community farm doubled its yields and donated 35% of our produce, roughly 3,000 pounds of vegetables, to our pop-up pantries and free markets. These markets were a food security program initiative to bring the food resources to the neighborhoods that needed the most. Another example of how we ramped up and did more for our community, we donated 55 pasture-raised organic chickens to make Thanksgiving hot meals for families in need. It was a farm-to-school program initiative that partnered with local restaurants to make healthy dinners for families. And lastly, we delivered our CSA boxes to participating families' doorsteps at no cost to reduce risk to them and their family. Mountain Roots has recently been recognized in person by the Governor of Colorado for our work. We were nominated by the State Office of Economic Security as a champion of change in the hunger arena. Here in our community, we are more highly visible than we have ever been. We are using that visibility to lift up local farmers and local producers, to amplify the voices of community members, to tell the story of food insecurity, and to raise awareness of food systems issues all around. People are listening. When you are wondering if the grocery store shelves will be empty or if you trust the source of that food, it causes people to consider where that food is coming from. And when you do that, it becomes more clear what environmental impacts the path from farm to fork has. The average person, regardless of their social or economic status, saw how fragile the industrial food system is and how dependent we are on it and how vulnerable we can be to its breakdowns. People are taking action. People very quickly turned to local farmers. People were suddenly seeking trusted local sources of clean and nourishing food. Farmers like us and the ones we support scrambled to double or even triple production to grow more food to meet the need. We know from talking with hundreds of people every week that people in Gunnison Valley care more about the source of their food, and localizing that source has become more important than ever. We see evidence of this from the surge in demand for local food from our local farmers, we are also seeing evidence that people want to be a part of the solution, not just by donating money or by buying local food, but by converting their yards into gardens in our Victory Garden Revival program, or volunteering in one of our community gardens. It's clear now that the pandemic will be affecting our lives much longer than anyone expected. The resilience of our farm and food system will be an essential factor in determining our success in responding and recovering from this pandemic and from the looming impacts of climate change. This is the time for the small farmer to shine. We are a small organization with an ambitious mission. We put community first. We start with the need and build up from the ground. We have gained a fair bit of experience in rural food systems work, and we have established strong community partnerships, the ability to mobilize volunteers, leverage resources, and the ability to be nimble, flexible, and responsive. We are land users who model and teach regenerative organic agriculture. We have the responsibility to educate the next generation of farmers to care for the land, because we know that the more you care for the land, the more the land gives back. As community leaders in conservation, we hold a key to leverage resources and community connections so that we can show our community how active conservation can play a role in creating community resiliency. In turn, we can then show our community how a thriving local food system bolsters our economy, has a positive impact on the environment, and improves equity and social justice. The farmers and food system workers we elevate are our neighbors, our family and friends, sharing our concerns and hopes for the future. Working together, we hold important solutions that help us take proactive steps towards making our food and agricultural system more equitable, more resilient, and more sustainable. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Lexi. That was so wonderful. That was really touching. And I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say, like, I really appreciate your work. And I know that this is the type of work that communities need more now than ever before. And so just thank you to you and to your organization for everything that you're doing. And that was a really inspiring talk. And I think the same can probably be said for Roberto Meza and the work that he's doing with East Denver Food Hub. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to him.
Great. Thank you, Michaela and 350 for having me share my experience and some of the work that we're doing out here in Bennett in the Eastern Plains. Lexi, that was super awesome. I love the work that you're doing and really paving the way for a new model for a food system. And I think we need more people like you and your organization and others to really build a strong regional food system. I do have some pictures to share, but I just kind of wanted to share a little bit about myself before my face leaves the screen. I was born in Mexico City, and my experience immigrating to the United States and moving through the whole kind of experience of social class and different neighborhoods really kind of gave me an awareness that to this day continues to impact my work. It was a very confusing time for me and my family as we were navigating the intersections of race and class and just trying to understand our place in the United States, as many immigrant families also have struggled to do. And it wasn't until I went to college that I developed the language to actually articulate that experience to myself. And that really kind of led me to seek different ways of communicating, which eventually allowed me to explore art as a way of integrating those experiences, making sense of them, and understanding different modalities of connecting with people through different mediums. And as a first generation farmer, I carry that with me. So I kind of blend my experience both as an immigrant and as an artist to try and understand my role as a farmer. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. Let's see. All right, can you all see that?
Yep, it looks great.
Awesome. So I am the co-founder and one of the farmers of Emerald Gardens, and also the co-founder and director of operations of the East Denver Food Hub. Both organizations are social enterprises that my business partner and I, David Demerling, developed out of a need to build a more food secure agriculture system that is committed to a project that we're probably approximating as we move forward, that we're calling food sovereignty. And I'm sure some of you have come across this term, and how that relates to community resilience and economic justice for our community. And so food sovereignty is central to our work because it allows us to engage in some imaginative thinking for what a sustainable, resilient, equitable, and more compassionate food system can be when we incorporate an awareness of our different cultures, our differences among communities, and when we incorporate voices that have been marginalized in this food system. We have a lot to bring as individuals and eaters, just consumers being part of a food system. And that, I think, needs to come forth in a way that supports our entire network of both food production, distribution, and consumption. And so this is more of the question that we always try to engage in, both our farming approach and the way that we interact with our crew members, the way we build partnerships, and the way we try to establish a sustainable economic and social justice model for food production within our organizations. And so in 2017, my business partner and fellow farmer, David, here on the left, we decided to come out to Colorado. We were both from Ohio, and I was working on a farm. David was an old high school friend of mine who also ventured into media, focused more on broadcast video, whereas I focused more on experimental video and art. We realized that we both had a passion for working with our hands, growing plants, and wanted to see if we could do this together. So serendipitously, we crossed paths on a farm that I was working on in Ohio, and he shared this amazing vision that he wanted to start a farm. And this was only my first year, but I felt extremely motivated and compelled because farming really allowed me to experience a healing and a connection to my community that I didn't experience as an artist. And so I had a kind of awakening and a renewed sense of purpose after my first year working on a farm. And a lot of the health struggles that I was previously experiencing due to being completely oblivious to my lifestyle and my connection to food when I was trying to pursue a career as an artist, really kind of turned into a self-exploratory journey to understand the connection between healing foods, farming, agriculture, and community. And so we came out to Colorado. We were fortunate enough to have had the support of our family and friends to acquire 35 acres in Bennett, out here about 15, 20 minutes east of Denver International Airport. And when we first arrived, we didn't have anything in the property. There was no infrastructure, there was no water or well, no power, and it had been heavily farmed monoculture for, I think, the 7 years before we got there. It was just basically very tired looking land. And so we realized that we needed to develop a farming approach that allowed us to recuperate some of those funds, to engage in a kind of rapid prototyping of sustainable agriculture that allowed us to access markets fairly quickly, and to engage in the community and develop our farming operation. And so we started growing microgreens. In 2018, we actually decided to move out to the farm once we had dug a well and built our first pole barn. And we realized that we could actually get a shipping container to start growing microgreens in it. Prior to that, I was incubating the business in Broomfield in a small 150 square foot passive solar greenhouse. And that was kind of the first attempt at a commercial, I guess, journey into agriculture, that it allowed us to transition from, you know, working on the farm to build it up to what we thought was going to be this market garden, and realized that it was going to take a lot more resources and a lot more time. And we were really reaching the ends of our economic stability. So we took a leap of faith, and we didn't quite have power yet, but we had enough knowledge of tinkering with solar power systems and generators to get the shipping container up and running. And so we moved that small production in our passive solar greenhouse in Broomfield into this shipping container. And that allowed us to basically maintain some of the wholesale accounts and farmers or restaurants that we had acquired in the first year of growing microgreens. Again, it was both an attempt to get a viable business off the ground, but also committed to food access, community, and food sovereignty. And that was basically the impetus for developing a microgreen operation on our rural property. And when the pandemic hit, like a lot of farmers, we experienced a loss of markets with restaurants, who were our primary kind of revenue source. We did have some smaller independent grocery stores, but that was kind of like the biggest one. And prior to the pandemic, we actually experienced a huge hit with the closure or the bankruptcy of Lucky's Market. That was one of our stronger kind of market connections, and they were about 3 or 4 months past due on invoices. And, you know, as young farmers, we were giving them as much leeway because we wanted to retain that relationship and that market, and we were sure they were going to come through. And then we got the bankruptcy letter, and we were like, oh, we're probably not going to see that money for a while. So we were already struggling to get a good footing coming into 2020, and the pandemic just doubled down on us, and you know, we weren't actually sure if we were going to make it through the season. So we actually leaned into our partnerships with a food co-op that we were working with, and we were helping them kind of facilitate their distribution and logistics processes as they were making their way across the I-70 corridor from the Eastern Plains. And we were kind of using our hub at our farm as a kind of aggregation hub to basically hand off or cross-dock with them so that we could complete their last mile deliveries to some of the same destinations that our microgreens were going. And so we pulled our resources together and managed to develop a model that eventually became our only way out when we were struggling with the pandemic, and eventually led us to create the East Denver Food Hub, which essentially began as a incubating project with Emerald Gardens. And when we saw the need that the pandemic created for facilitating the transfer of food and the flow of food through our communities, we saw the opportunity to essentially address a lot of the inconsistencies that we were experiencing as a small farm, both in our distribution challenges, because at the time we were too small to be taken up by a major distributor and too big to do our own distribution. And so leaning into our cooperative values, you know, we started to work with the High Plains Food Co-op as a way to collectivize, or I should say maybe democratize, the struggle of distribution. And they were originally, High Plains was doing a once a month pickup location at the Tramway Center in 5 Points. And we were facilitating a lot of that logistical process. And in doing so, we realized that we had a good grasp on how to move food through our communities. So when the pandemic hit, we realized that we could go direct to consumer, and that would be a way that East Denver Food Hub could both help High Plains and our farm, Emerald Gardens. And so we started to bundle all of our products together. That became basically a once a week delivery with another partner called Bondadosa, who would do our residential, what we're calling our local mile delivery within the 15-mile radius of Denver. And it was amazing to see this pivot happen just in the nick of time, where we were able to get food to people when interruptions of the supply chain just couldn't do so. We realized the resiliency that we actually had because of the need to survive and to mitigate the economic fallout, while at the same time meeting the immediate need that was evident in our food system, in our communities. And again, the question, how do we move forward with food sovereignty in this now kind of dual organizational structure that allowed some synergy to develop between all of our partners and our year-round farm. And so we just started to explore that even more on a high-level theoretical perspective, while at the same time doing the logistical work on the ground to facilitate distribution of food through our communities in a time of need. And so we actually began to explore what different synergy and model of food sovereignty and the expressions of it that could actually impact our communities in a meaningful way. And so as our food hub began to grow, we started to work with organizations like Live Well Colorado, now called Nourish, supplying their WIC boxes, their women, infants, and children boxes, and procuring product from High Plains because they were already coming with their orders, their direct-to-consumer orders to our farm and our food hub. And so we just started aggregating those into our WIC boxes and working with other farmers in the Front Range that were also struggling. And so the food hub became a way of meeting a lot of different needs, both for communities and for producers. And to the benefit of Emerald Gardens, we saw an increased kind of production. And so we started to hire people like Irving on the left, who is a DACA dreamer and has been struggling to make ends meet, but he's an avid mushroom grower because he used to work at the Grow House, if any of you are familiar with that nonprofit that had to close down for structural reasons and kind of transitioned into food distribution as well. But he didn't want to pack boxes. He wanted to farm mushrooms. And so we hired him first to work in the greenhouse, and then found investment from a local benefactor to develop the mushroom production facilities also in shipping containers on Emerald Gardens. And so this gave us the idea of leveraging our resources and our land to provide opportunities to folks that have been marginalized through different systemic and economic reasons. And it allowed us to develop a kind of model that both leaned into the food hub as a way to provide food to people that were experiencing food insecurities. The food hub was mostly working with nonprofits and essentially addressing hunger at the root, because now we weren't just producing food for those communities, we were providing jobs. And for me and for our team, that became apparent in that in order to address hunger, we have to address economic justice. That's one of the things that keeps people dependent upon food pantries and food donation models. And so we're like, how do we make this work? Emerald Gardens began to look at food safety certifications as a way to work with major distributors that could amplify our distribution for those products. And so with the certification that we eventually acquired from the USDA for good agricultural practices, that allowed us to work with distributors like What Chefs Want, who is kind of the the new face of the former Growers Organic Fresh Pack Fresh Point distributor. And now they're helping us deliver our microgreens throughout the state, and soon we'll be delivering mushrooms as well. So that's one way in which Emerald Gardens has been able to remove barriers of entry for community members that are both interested in farming and were experiencing economic hardships, either due to their immigrant status or just because they've never had the opportunity to actually determine their own economic situation. And that basically has allowed us to both lean on Emerald Gardens and East Denver Food Hub as a way to address hunger and economic justice during this pandemic. And so this is some images of the WIC boxes. Early on in the year, we applied for a Blueprint to End Hunger grant. As a for-profit, we didn't know if we were going to be eligible, because a lot of these recipients were nonprofits. And that's kind of the challenge being a for-profit enterprise, is that it's really hard to get grants and to do this kind of system changing food access work without having a nonprofit or a fiscal sponsor to help us. But I think this really reveals kind of the bootstrapping resiliency of farmers, and I would dare to say the stubbornness to make something work in the most difficult situations. And so we actually got a grant from Blueprint that allowed us to buy food from other farms, as well as purchase a refrigerated truck that was a huge, huge asset to the food hub. And so we developed this model that essentially grew out of our work and our partnerships with High Plains and Bondadosa to do a weekly delivery of WIC boxes to families in both Jefferson County, Tri-County, and Denver County. And that quickly allowed us to innovate what a model of a equitable and resilient food system grown from the ground, from the grassroots, from community members coming together to see how we can both have an eye on the granular, on the ground, while having an eye at the moon. How do we meet immediate needs now while building a long-term model for a sustainable food system? And this also kind of allowed us to showcase East Denver Food Hub as a vendor at the Lost City Market that was a pay-what-you-can farmers market in partnership with Focus Points in the Globeville, Elyria, Swansea neighborhood. And so when Grow House shut down, a lot of those community members who used to go to that kind of tiered pricing grocery store started to now come to this pay-what-you-can farmers market. And that really allowed us to understand kind of in a way the what the sustainability of food access economics actually can be, and allowed us to kind of think about how do we make the work that we want to do without leaning so much on philanthropy, but also instilling a level of dignity, because although a lot of these customers were struggling to make ends meet and were low income, they experience a level of dignity even just paying 50 cents for a $30 order, right? Or 25 cents or $1. Sometimes, they would pay more, and customers had a choice of either not paying anything, paying a fraction of it, or paying more. And that flexibility kind of informed our awareness of, economics and creative economics in a time of need for people and for producers, so that we could continue to pay a fair price for the farmers that we were procuring products from, while at the same time providing those high quality organic fruits and veggies to community members that may not have been financially stable enough to pay full price. And so this is our crew. On the left is Caden, who also used to work at the Grow House. He is now our greenhouse production manager. And we actually hired another former Grow House employee who is now kind of helping Caden with some of the work. Shabazz is the one next to Caden on the right. He's our driver. He's our community kind of liaison from Montbello. So he's got a lot of different connections in those neighborhoods. He's also our chef, and he's starting up a community co-op livestock rotational program on our 35 acres because we have so much land that we want to do something with that. And so he came in with this idea that, hey, you know, I have family and friends that want to partake in this project. We can learn about regenerative agriculture, sustainability, soil health, and we also have a source of food. Granted, this might not be eligible for our commercial wholesale distribution, but it will be a source of kind of a food security that our community members can take part in. And then we have here on the right, this is, I forgot his name. He came to a few markets. He's actually the nephew of Shabazz, who came to help out as a volunteer in exchange for some food. And then we have over here Donovan, who works at Groundwork Denver. He was here for pretty much every single farmer's market and helping out and just you know, experiencing this incredible connection with food and community and entrepreneurs. And so he's now looking at ways of diversifying farmers markets in different neighborhoods based on this model. And that's me on the right, trying to contain the chaos of the entire 2020 summer season. But I think what we're really allowing people to do is come in with projects so that they can actually begin to, you know, incubate whatever they want. And so we're now seeing ourselves less as kind of, you know, co-founders or directors, even though those are our titles, but more facilitators for people to do what they want to do in the food and farming system. And that for us is really the entire definition of food sovereignty, is getting out of the way so that folks can come in and really know how to feed their communities. But you know, right now our next step is to find a brick and mortar location in Denver because we just keep growing. Our method is essentially uplifting the model of local procurement so that a lot of the CARES Act funding and federal relief funding stays in communities instead of being an extractive model that goes to major distributors or, you know, products from maybe not so equitable production origins or distribution origins. And so along with the pilots, there is a level of education that we try to promote in terms of, you know, understanding why the cost of local food is higher than, you know, what you see in the grocery store. And in that, I think, is a level of dignity and respect and, you know, paying farmers a fair price for their products. And so that carries on through the entire supply chain. So when, you know, we were fortunate enough to work with food pantries through the Food Pantry Assistance Grant, that was basically a state-funded program that allowed food pantries to purchase Colorado Proud products. You know, a lot of the pushback that we got was like, this is too expensive. We have this number of families to feed. We have this much money. Like, we have to get cheaper food. And so by really engaging with them on, you know, building awareness on their procurement practices, they're now beginning to interrogate how their current practices tend to perpetuate hunger and kind of increase the number of families that are dependent on food pantries. And so together we're trying to understand, you know, how to change the model. And rather than going wide and trying to feed as many people as possible as cheaply as possible, we're going deep, trying to change the system at the root by understanding the economics and the consequences of some of our current procurement practices. Along with that, it's giving us an idea for, you know, working with master's students, specifically CU Boulder Masters in the Environment students, to develop capstone projects that will allow us to develop markers, metrics, data, and analysis of food sovereignty. Currently, there is no such kind of data collection on that. And it's really hard for people to understand that without having those numbers in front of them and really seeing the impact across our entire food system. So I think in order for us to move forward and to ensure that we can buffer another pandemic, we need to develop a new language, new optics, and new economics for how we can invest in social enterprises that address hunger at the root and promote economic justice in our communities. And that's what we're looking for now. We've been reaching out to a lot of local funders, foundations, investors, and saying, you know, we might not be a nonprofit, but we can ensure economic sustainability, help us develop a food hub that is desperately needed in Denver that can both educate people, provide a brick and mortar solution to retail and food access, and help us kind of incorporate commissary kitchen space, incubating local food businesses, and scaling the model of the East Denver Food Hub.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Roberto. That was incredible. I mean, what a story of being creative surrounding opportunity and taking something that seemed like this insurmountable hurdle in the face of the pandemic and then the bankruptcy story with Lucky's and turning that into just something incredible that's had such a profound effect on the community. Thank you for sharing that. We have a lot of questions coming in the chat, which is great. So I'd like to start off with Lexi, if that's okay. And I'll just read this out for everyone, even though I'm sure you can see it in the chat. But who are your target consumers? How do you reach out to these individuals in your communities? And what types of metrics are important to measure success?
Great question. We want everybody to have fresh, local, healthy food. So our consumers are really everybody. But we also focus on low-income families. We get funding through Health and Human Services locally to pay for CSA shares for low-income individuals, for WIC, and also for senior resources. And we reach these individuals through our partnerships with the food pantry, through our partnerships with the local farmers. Our CSA program is a great way to reach our community and get produce into the hands of local families. We also were awarded a planning grant from the USDA to do local food promotion. So now we're really sitting down at these roundtables between our producers and consumer markets, both direct to consumer and wholesale consumer accounts, to find out what the barriers are around local food and how we can not only reach local to the Gunnison Valley, but regional to the Western Slope. And then we collect data and quantify our impacts, is kind of how we measure our success, both by talking with people one-on-one and figuring out what we can do to better our services to them, but then also just keeping good records of our growth and the families that we do reach within our community.
Awesome. Thank you, Lexi. Roberto, would you like to answer that as well?
Sure. Yeah, I think, we kind of go by way of education as marketing. I think, some of my many roles also kind of tend to be in policy. I'm a member of the Denver Sustainable Food Policy Council, also a board member of the National Young Farmers Coalition. And, we're really trying to understand how to essentially both build relationships that are beneficial to our businesses while at the same time creating change. And so one of the things that I've been doing is just piloting different models based on the WIC program that we do, and pitching it to different nonprofits who basically have the funds to buy local product. And we essentially try and replicate that model either through word of mouth or just through engagement and conversation. But I think our reputation has kind of superseded our marketing to the point where there's a lot of nonprofits, including, for example, over the summer, we did a lot of work with Boulder Food Rescue that wanted to also address a lot of the economic concerns that we were trying to propose in our model to help farmers remain viable. And so for us, it really is important to both do the work but also develop policies that support that work. And right now, we're about to issue a mayoral advisory in Denver that will substantiate the farmer to food access models that we've been trying to develop. So it's kind of awesome that, out of the work now grows the policy that can eventually have another approach to systemic change. And we also just, provide the services of logistics and distribution. So if a food pantry, for example, has an abundance of food, where in another community, the food pantry doesn't have that much food, and it's just the rhythm of the community members that come in and out. Sometimes they call us up to basically get their surplus and take it to another food pantry. And so that's another way that we kind of are able to both meet the immediate need and also cover our costs, and it helps us retain the employment of Shabazz, who's doing such an amazing job as our driver. And I think, we might go direct to consumer, but right now, there is this amazing opportunity to just replicate these pilots of local food distribution and food boxes with different communities and nonprofits. So that's sort of been our target.
Awesome, thank you. Another question, and Roberto, you kind of touched on this, but I think that people would love if you expanded a little bit, and then also if Lexi, if you could jump in. Is it possible to interpret food sovereignty, you talked about food sovereignty a little bit, as both the ability to grow and distribute food that's in a way that's equitable and sufficient? So does that incorporate food security? And then also, could you maybe give an example of what ethnically produced food would look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's our entire mission. And I think for us, it's not moving forth with a very strict and kind of solid model or mentality. It's constantly interrogating as we do the work and being sensitive to the feedback that our own community members are offering us, and being able to be kind of self-aware in that nature allows us to better grasp the nuances, the contradictions, and some of the conflict involved in being a for-profit social enterprise trying to do what some may see as nonprofit work. And so, for us, it really is about, sort of getting out of the way and letting people do what they want to do and letting people do what they need to do. We mostly become conduits through our connections and our resources, and, through events like this to share our model and build support, so that we are able to get more funding, more resources to help communities do what they need to do. That's kind of how we see it. And, I've always been challenged. For example, microgreens are not culturally appropriate. And I got this feedback a lot until I actually responded in Spanish. And I said, actually, they are, and I explained how, we cook them in my family. For example, when I shared it with my mom, she started incorporating them into her Mexican cooking. And same with a lot of other families. I think, microgreens have just had a bad rap in terms of being relegated to a fine dining garnish, when really it's just a younger version of a green that we are all familiar with. So just understanding that cultural context allows us to mitigate, the cultural appropriateness, because I could say the same thing about Coca-Cola being culturally appropriate in Mexico, right? And so I think we just need to be very aware how we define culturally appropriate or ethnically appropriate. But I think for us, it's more important to address ethically important foods. How do we address ethics in our food production and distribution? And how do we ensure and protect workers' rights, fair price, dignity, and respect throughout the entire supply chain, which is something I want to have a talk with the USDA about some point, but that's another conversation.
Thank you. That was really interesting. Lexi, do you want to add on to that at all? About how you guys define food sovereignty and if it's incorporated into your organization?
We know that we have a long ways to go here in the Gunnison Valley with food sovereignty. But one of the programs that we are working on in Mountain Roots is more of an artistic spin on sharing your unique story of food insecurity. And so we have an art gallery set up both in Crested Butte and at the Gunnison Art Center, allowing, we talked to hundreds of people, took their picture, let them share their story, and then put that in a public space so that people can really see that story within our community. And I think allowing people to share their story and their perspective is so important in bringing people into the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, Lexi. I totally agree. Thank you for sharing that. And we have another question from Julie, and she's wondering if people can sponsor, purchase a partial CSA or sponsor a family in need. And I guess that would just lead into a broader question that I would ask is, what do your organizations need right now? What challenges are you facing and what would help? And Lexi, let's start with you.
We have all sorts of opportunities to sponsor families in need, whether that is buying a Thanksgiving hot meal for a family, donating that way. We do have an option to pay for a partial CSA or any scale from $20 to the full thing for families participating in our food security programs, which we work with Health and Human Services to help get these resources to families that are already signed up for food assistance. We as an organization are always looking for ways to give back, and so like donating your time is usually the most beneficial for us, whether that, and I know that's not really possible for people in Denver, but yeah, we always really appreciate just the boots on the ground helping us get things done.
Thank you. Roberto, I'll go ahead and hand it off to you.
Yeah, I think for us, we're at a point where we just want to get a space, want to learn about real estate, want to try and be able to integrate partners into the food system. What I see so often is there's different organizations doing their own thing. And, I think Mountain Roots is doing a really good job about connecting with different producers and other cooperatives and partnerships. And that really is what a local food system is, right? We can't just do it alone. We need the support and the alignment with a lot of other organizations and community members. And so, we're essentially trying to do that by having a physical location that allows us to both be closer to the communities we want to serve and also be a hub for logistical purposes that can connect with a bunch of other organizations and food hubs or cooperatives in the Denver metro region. We are pursuing a plan that is kind of looking at partnerships throughout the state and even in the adjacent states so that we can actually develop a regionalized food shed that can feed Colorado during the gaps in our seasonal production calendars. We see that, I think there was a statistic, I don't know where I saw it, but over 90% of the food we get isn't from Colorado. And I think we need to optimize food production. And I think a lot of that has to do with partnerships and supply chain connections within the state to strengthen them, streamline them, so that maybe we can reach the kind of limit of feeding our communities with the food grown in Colorado first, and then finding alignment with other partners so that we can develop a more equitable kind of food system that potentially can rival the dominant industrialized food system. That could be a very idealistic, dreamy mission, but we're working on it little by little. So I think our two main ways that people can support is just helping us connect with organizations, foundations, funders, anybody that wants to see this model actually take root, and provide some technical assistance or partnerships so that we can actually find a space to build a bona fide food hub that addresses all of these issues and can help us develop our model. And the other thing is just being an ambassador, teaching people what really is, to develop equity in our food system, inclusion, and to understand maybe some of the systemic hurdles that prevent those things from happening.
Thank you. I think we answered all of the questions in the chat. So in the last few minutes, I just wanted to open it up to anyone in the audience if you want to come off mute and ask a question. And if not, then I have plenty of questions, so I can keep going for a few minutes. Does anyone have any questions? It's going once. All right, I'll go ahead and ask a question. I have a question for both of you. This is the Regenerative Ag and Local Food Committee, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit in our last few minutes about what the word regenerative really means to you, and how you bring that word into your organization, both on the farm and off the farm. Lexi, you can start if you want. I mean, whoever.
We define it as doing things in a way that doesn't compromise future generations from, having access to their resources or to their food or to their, the things that they need in their lives. We also think about it as, a circle or a cycle where you're not wasting anything and you are using every little, you're kind of putting it back into the system, I guess. And I guess that's more of an agricultural practice. So what we do, rotational grazing, organic, we make our own compost and use that, and everything that goes into the soil brings health to the soil. We also focus on biodiversity. So we have a food forest at our farms where that's like long-term food resource, but it also kind of diversifies the markets that we can access with either herbs or perennial flowers that also have benefits to the ecosystem and for pollinators. Yeah.
Thank you. That was great. Roberto?
I like the permaculture motto of, coming to a place and making it better than how you found it. And so that's kind of how we try and both practice that in our farming production. We grow hydroponically, and a lot of the sustainability is built into our technology. We have a passive solar greenhouse. We were aware of water conservation and only water about 1 or 2 minutes a day, which is why we think, hydroponics is really important, especially in Colorado as we're going through this drought. And the water that comes out of our greenhouse is used to nurture the soil and the plants that we're growing outside. So we're trying to find what a hybrid model of both regenerative agriculture in the field can look like, as creating synergy with a hydroponic passive solar greenhouse production system. We also are using livestock as a way to heal the soil, practice rotational grazing, and understand what that can mean for the Eastern Plains, which is very different from a lot of regions in Colorado. And, also, being aware of both the metaphor and the applicability of that in terms of understanding ecosystems in the soil and taking that perspective to ecosystems in our food system. And that's, sometimes I use the phrase, eco food system, like that's what we're all a part of. And we're organisms just at a different scale than organisms in the soil. And so how do we transfer the soil food web beneath our feet to a kind of soil food system that incorporates humans and the movement of food, just as underground there's the movement of nutrients. And so every organism needs those nutrients to survive. And what we see again and again is that the earth continues to regenerate in different ways. So there's a lot to learn beneath our feet.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, we are at 8:01, so I guess we're done, even though I'm sure we could all talk all night. This was fascinating. Before you both head off, I would love it if you're comfortable dropping your contact information and your socials in the chat. I know there were a lot of people who had further questions and wanted to get in touch with you. And I will also drop my information. So anyone out there who wants to follow up with me to get in touch with Lexi or Roberto, or just to learn more about our committee, please feel free to reach out. And I'll just stay on for a couple minutes. So anyone who needs to glean anything from the chat, I won't shut us down yet. And Lexi and Roberto, thank you so much for your time tonight. It was so great talking to you both. I know that you're both probably incredibly busy, especially now during this crazy time. And this was just a really refreshing conversation and, positive little blip in the craziness that's happening right now. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you all of our attendees too. Thanks for coming tonight. Have a great night, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks,
Michaela?
Hi, Dina.
Hello. Wow, this was
That was
amazing.
good, huh?
It was even more than I expected. These guys are like true visionaries who actually move it, not just,
Yeah,
wow.
I really want to, I'm going to email them both and I want to connect with them and see how the committee can support their work because it's just incredible.
Yeah, sure thing. And one little technical thing about this dialog box. So sometimes you can, any attendee can save the chat. There's like little option, but I know it doesn't often appear when 350